I, an Anglican, who by definition is halfway to being a Catholic, I'm greatly honored by the invitation to come here as a special guest and have the opportunity to deliver this address to the 19th Plenary Assembly of the Symposium of Episcopal Conferences of Africa and Madagascar, SICAM, which is being held in our vibrant capital of Accra, and whose headquarters is coincidentally located here in Accra. The symposium could not have picked a much better venue for this event. As we say in Ghana, akwaba, our word of welcome. You're amongst the people who pride themselves on their sense of hospitality. I hope that by the end of your visit, you will agree with this claim. I'm also hoping there will be time away from the conference discussions for you to see the delightful treasures of our country and get to meet the warm and friendly people of Ghana. I was originally asked to deliver a short address of 15 minutes at this plenary. However, it is not every day that I get an opportunity to speak to such an august gathering. So I believe you will pardon me if I go a little bit beyond the time allotted. Being president of the nation that hosts SICAM must count for something. Eminent clergy, you have set yourselves the most important task at this conference, with a chosen theme under which your discussions will be held. Security and migration in Africa are at the very heart of the problems that currently beset our continent. And indeed, the conference itself has been hit by the import of the theme before you could even start. Judging from the invitation sent to me, Ghana was not the first choice for this symposium. The plan had been to go to our neighbor to the north, Burkina Faso, and it is the events there and the consequences thereof which have led the Bishops' Conference to accept the change of venue of the symposium to Ghana and Accra. The first responsibility that the state owes to its people is to establish its security and stability. Everything else grows out of a secure and stable state. Some 60-odd years since the majority of African countries gained their independence, the African peoples have a right to expect to live in secure and stable countries. After the great promise and excitement of the early years of independence, political freedom, unfortunately, did not deliver the economic prosperity we hoped for. Indeed, our continent was plagued with political instability, manifested mostly by military coups and widespread poverty. The absence of security and stability led to our young people losing confidence they could build successful futures in their own countries. And migration to Europe and America became the main aspiration of African youth. I doubt there'll ever be a more depressing phenomenon than our young people thinking of and embarking on the perilous journey across the Sahara Desert and the Mediterranean Sea to get to Europe. A few weeks ago, another painful scene was played out in Melilla, where Europe has a land border with Africa. Hundreds of our young people, driven to desperation, tried to force their way into the European enclave of Melilla, and what they imagined would be the dream of a better life in Europe. Many of them ended up being killed. The rest were brutalized and traumatized. We have condemned the brutality. The African Union has issued the appropriate protest. But the truth is, unless we create the atmosphere in our countries that would engender hope, that incident will simply be added to the long list of incidents in which young Africans are humiliated and lose their lives in their attempts to reach Europe. Throughout the ages, migration has been an essential feature of human activity. Indeed, time was when the migration traffic was from Europe into Africa, and the Africans who ended up in the Americas were not willing migrants, but were taken there against their will in the most infamous of trades, the barbaric and inhumane transatlantic slave trade. It is important to point out that migration has many positive aspects, including the infusion of skills and new energy in the countries of destination. As I have said on another occasion, there will always be adventurers amongst us who would want to see challenges in different parts of the world, and we would wish them well and expect that wherever they go, they will be treated with dignity. The reality is that if the country from which you start your journey of migration is prospering, you will be treated with respect wherever you go. But if our young people subject themselves to the intolerable and inhumane conditions of crossing the Sahara and drowning in the Mediterranean in the hope of making a living in Europe, there's no chance of their being treated with respect when they make it to Europe. Nor can those of us left behind ever hope to be treated with respect by the rest of the world. Much of the history of many of our countries has been characterized by civil wars since independence. But in the past decade or so, the continent has also faced a different source of instability. The Sahelian region of the continent in West Africa especially has been recently under constant threat posed by jihadists. We in Ghana have watched in horror as country after country in the region has suffered attacks from terrorist groups, and their activities have spread from the Sahel towards the coastal states of West Africa. It is in this context that we applaud the efforts you have made to launch a Sahelian peace initiative to complement the efforts of ECOWAS, just as we continue to welcome the social services that your organizations, like the Catholic Relief Services, continue to provide in these sensitive areas. Our immediate neighbors, Burkina Faso, Côte d'Ivoire, and Togo, have all experienced such attacks in various degrees of intensity. Similar instability and attacks have plagued countries in the Horn of Africa for decades. It is not just the difficulties posed by such instability to everyday life that we need to worry about. There's also the debilitating problem of being seen as coming from an unstable neighborhood. Once branded as such, getting anything done is twice as expensive and difficult simply because of your geographic location. The so-called Africa Risk Premium, payable on access to the international capital market for African borrowers, is a good illustration of this phenomenon, which entails an unfair increase in the cost of borrowing for African debtors. We, the political leaders of our countries, carry the responsibilities to help make Africa, to take Africa out of poverty, to help grow our economies, and to help bring prosperity. We have the responsibility to make our countries attractive to the citizens and for the young people to have reason to believe they have a future here and not risk their lives trying to get into parts of the world where they and their generations remain second-class citizens. We cannot build this happy and prosperous society we aspire to unless we lead rounded lives. It means we must give equal attention to the training of the head, the heart, and the hand. The head alone will not take us to the promised land, nor will the heart, the hand alone take us. We need a citizenry that pays equal attention to the head, the hand, and the heart to be able to build a successful society. We're investing a lot in education and other sectors of the economy. We're providing the infrastructure and the teachers that will ensure we have a skilled workforce. We're building roads, drains, hospitals, and schools. We're creating the atmosphere for entrepreneurs to flourish and create jobs, and for our creative artists to have room to let their imagination take them to heights yet unknown. As a result, in the years 2017 when I took office to 2020, before the outbreak of the pandemic, we were building a strong economy with an annual average GDP growth rate of 7%, one of the fastest rates of growth in the world at the time. In the course of developing our countries, we do not want our artists, engineers, architects, technicians, and artisans ever to lose sight of the aesthetic and cultural dimensions of their work and what it is that makes us Ghanaians and Africans. Our music, our food, our clothes, our poetry, all form part of this development process and go to define us and build the self-confidence that we need to establish our place in the modern world. We in Ghana are in the process of attempting to construct for ourselves such a modern and prosperous nation. We have, for the past 29 years of our Fourth Republic, enjoyed political stability under a multi-party constitution and the longest period of stable constitutional governance in our hitherto tumultuous history. The separation of powers is now a real phenomenon in Ghanaian life, promoting accountable governance. The fight against corruption has gone beyond propaganda and mere rhetoric. Following the enactment of specific laws and systemic institutional upgrades which have enhanced significantly the capacity of the state in the fight against corruption, an enhancement that has to be duly grounded in the application of due process to respect the teachings of the Constitution. We have in this period experienced through the ballot box the transfer of power from one ruling political party to another on 3 occasions in conditions of peace and stability without threatening the foundations of the state. There's genuine religious tolerance evident in inter- and intra-religious cooperation and in peaceful coexistence and harmony amongst the Christian and Muslim communities in our country. The Ghanaian people have manifested in this era their deep attachment to the principles of democratic accountability, respect for individual liberties and human rights, and the rule of law. This has also brought with it more or less systematic economic growth and boosted immensely our self-confidence and strengthened our reputation as a beacon of freedom, democracy, and stability on the African continent. Indeed, it is these efforts that have reinforced our position as the second most peaceful country in Africa. We are ranked as the best trade and investment hub in West Africa, with 56% of the young people in Ghana believing Ghana is moving in the right direction. We will continue to work to realize the vision of our forebears who envisioned us to be the Black Star of Africa. COVID-19 has devastated our economies, which has been exacerbated by the aftermath of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. No country on earth has been spared the extensive difficulties brought forth by these occurrences. And I'm sure all of you, eminent clergy, are experiencing these in your respective countries. Over the past years, in particular, my government has implemented a number of policies and programs, all in an attempt to hasten economic recovery from the depredations of COVID-19. We have introduced measures to improve fiscal consolidation and ensure debt sustainability, which are crucial and critical to achieving macroeconomic stability in the short to medium term. Sooner rather than later, we will emerge strongly out of these challenges. Eminent clergy, faith and religion play an important part in this wholesome development that I speak of. And you, as religious leaders, play critical roles in that development. It is to you that people instinctively turn when faced with the troubles and difficulties of life. And you can, by your attitude and your words, either stoke fires or bring calm to troubled waters. When the world is in tumult, as it is today, the faith that gives inner strength and something to lean on becomes even more important than usual. I have every confidence that you will rise to the occasion and provide this anchor during these difficult times. Whilst I'm here, it would be remiss of me not to take advantage of the opportunity to address a subject that is in your area of competence and is very much in the news here, currently in Ghana. We have embarked on the construction of a national cathedral, which we hope would fill a missing link in our nation's spiritual architecture by providing a formal space for the religious activities of the state. Designed by the iconic Ghanaian global architect, David Adjaye, who designed the National Museum of African American History and Culture Museum in Washington, D.C., capital of the United States of America. Our national cathedral will provide an interdenominational space for worship and will attempt to serve God at the center of our nation-building efforts, providing an official venue of worship for state occasions in a nation that is predominantly Christian, that is a nation where more than 70% of the people are self-confessed Christians. It will also serve as a fulcrum for propagating the Christian faith, unifying the Christian community, and serve as a tribute to religious liberty. But more importantly, it will serve as our collective thanksgiving to the Almighty for the blessings He has bestowed on us, on our nation, sparing us the ravages of civil war that have bedeviled the histories of virtually all our neighbors and the outbreak of mass epidemics. Just as building the Temple of Solomon was an epoch-making event not only in Israel, but also in the whole world, we believe the building of the National Cathedral is an epochal event not only in Ghana, but also in the rest of Africa. Thus, although the National Cathedral was envisaged for Ghana, we have included elements to make it relevant to the African Church. The design, described as, and quote, an architectural expression of African Christianity, unquote, captures the moment when Christianity became a significant force on Africa's cultural landscape. David Adjaye, whose current major work, the construction of the Abrahamic House in the United Arab Emirates, UAE, is scheduled to be commissioned by His Holiness Pope Francis by the end of this year, says the Ghana National Cathedral is being developed as a home for African Christianity. The project also includes a Bible Museum of Africa and will be the largest Bible museum in the world, with a thematic focus on, firstly, the role of Africa and Africans in the Bible, and secondly, the history and contemporary place of the Church in Africa and in the African diaspora. It will house the Bible, translate it into African languages, tell the story of the Church in Africa and the African diaspora, and provide a convening platform for discussions on the role of faith in Africa's transformation. There will also be the Biblical Gardens of Africa, which will include the trees, shrubs, and flowers of the Bible, and serve as a major resource for Christians all over the African continent. These three initiatives, the path-breaking design, the Bible Museum of Africa, and the Biblical Gardens of Africa, will help to ensure the relevance of the project to the Church in Africa. We intend also to engage the Vatican Museum and Library to see whether it will be possible to secure artifacts that will help to make this into a major resource center for African Christians. The Vatican has been known to provide such assistance in appropriate cases. The project has run into some contemporary controversy currently about the funding. My personal view has always been that even though the cathedral will be very much a national institution, the cost should be largely borne by the Christian community, with the state providing the land and initial funding to get the project off the ground. Looking through the history of all the great cathedrals of the world, there has never been what can be called an appropriate time to build a cathedral. Invariably, it has taken many years, sometimes centuries, to complete. The National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. took 83 years to complete. It took 150 years to build St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, and it took 182 years to finish the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. Indeed, the reigning medieval monarchs of the time made significant contributions towards the construction of Notre Dame in Paris. And in the case of the Basilica, construction began and was completed during the era of the papacy's greatest temporal power, again, in medieval times. When these great cathedrals were built, the societies that housed them had not finished with the satisfaction of their major development needs: hospitals, schools, bridges, roads, homes needed to be built. And I dare say, if one were to consider only those needs, there would never be a good time to build a church, a cathedral, or any of the great buildings of faith around the world. But once they are built, they've proven to be instruments that brought people together and deepened the spiritual and emotional experience of a vast majority of people. I'm fortified by the words of Holy Scripture in Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 4, which says, and I quote, "If you wait until the wind and the weather are just right, you will never sow anything and never harvest anything," unquote. I'm hoping that the Christian community in Ghana, Africa, and abroad will rise up to the challenge and join in the fundraising for the construction of the National Cathedral. I do not envisage that this project will take a century to complete, like the great historical cathedrals of the world. Technology has transformed building methods dramatically, and I'm certain that if the Christian community accepts the challenge, we shall construct this cathedral, and quickly. Once completed, its value will be obvious to all. 3 years ago, on 15th April 2019, the great Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris was engulfed by a big fire. The next morning, the French president, His Excellency Emmanuel Macron, stood by the devastated monument and said, and I quote, "Notre Dame is our history, our literature, part of our psyche, the place of all our great events, our epidemics, our wars, our liberations, the epicenter of our lives," unquote. That statement sparked a dramatic response amongst the French people, for it led many French men and women, great and small, to make generous contributions towards the restoration of the great iconic monument, which is fully on course. Those words struck a deep chord within me. That is what I see as the purpose of our national cathedral. Let us build our national cathedral to be the epicenter of our lives, the place for our great celebrations, our thanksgiving, our funerals, the place for great moments of silence and introspection, the place that symbolizes the place of faith in our national psyche. I give my personal undertaking that the funds raised for the building of the National Cathedral will be treated with the sacred trust that they deserve, with transparency and accountability. Eminent clergy, I pray that you have fruitful discussions and your conference is successful. We look forward to hearing the results of your deliberations. And let me again remind those of you who are visitors to make time to visit our beautiful country. And let me, in conclusion, express great joy and gratitude to the Holy Father for the elevation of our worthy compatriot, Bishop Bawab Richard Kuya, and our fellow African, Bishop Okpalike of Nigeria, to the enviable status of cardinals of the Catholic Church. They are both to be warmly congratulated. I had the great pleasure and privilege to be part of the government delegation in October 2003 as then Minister for Foreign Affairs that accompanied Bishop Peter Turkson to Rome when he was elevated by Pope John II, John Paul II, to the status of cardinal. It was a great eye-opener for me, which I continue to treasure till today, including the companionship of Archbishop Gabriel Palmer Buckle, who was with us in Rome at the time. May God bless the Sympoium of Episcopal Conferences of Africa and Madagascar, SICAM, Mother Africa, and us all. I thank you for your attention.